Air. A sacred, essential, ecological, spiritual event of an invisible element that surrounds us from our first breath till our last. Breath is life. Breath is invisible, and it is always moving. It is never, ever still. From a wonderful book, William Bryant Logan, I don't know if you know it, this is from Air, the Restless Shaper of the World. The air in every moment is a special gift. Every moment is a special gift. There is no planet within 20 parsecs that is like it. Perhaps no other place anywhere that has such air. Air is the archetype of restless eminence. I kind of love that. An archetype of restless eminence. It is full of invisible movements, invisible contents, and through what it does and what it brings, it makes and unmakes the world it envelops. There is no actor more powerful on this earth, and yet, for the most part, we studiously ignore it. Air. How often do we think about it? Well, if we have asthma, we do. But we think about it at that moment just before the attack, or during the attack, or the anxiety of things that might bring it about, or if we have COPD. But in general, how much of your day has even been a thought that crosses your mind? If you write little notes and you place them around your house and just write the word breathe on you, you know your subconscious every time you see it will breathe. Your body will automatically interpret that without you even consciously thinking about it. Breathe. Jen Phillips, one of my favorite poets, spiritual teachers and authors of this wonderful book called No Ordinary Time, writes, "We are here to make the invisible visible. We are here to make the invisible visible. Like the soap bubbles that we blew, destined to pop, carriers of breath, ethereal and beautiful." We have all of these stories and all these ways of making the visible invisible. We use all kinds of event markers. One of those is scent. One of those is smoke. Our ancient relatives and our modern faiths light fires. We light a fire every single week. Some add herbs, some use plants and resins to infuse the air, to bring it to a visibility. Some inhale tobacco as part of a sacred act of reclaiming the earth and the air beings that give us the air back into the world. Some use incense and censers. All of this tangible reminders, all of these ways to connect with that which is invisible. The ancient Hebrew word, ruach, and I'm probably not a good pronunciation of that, but it's ruach, means breath. It also means air. It also means wind. It also means spirit. It also means life. And I believe it's really important to read all of those layers when we read any of these texts. We hear these words. Not it means this or that. It's this or that. It's this and this. It's this and this. That our word for spirit is to be understood as the pervasive, essential, and eternal qualities of air, of wind, of life. The same air that I just breathed in, the same air that you all breathed in, the same air that you breathed out into those bubbles was once inside somebody else.
I never thought about it.
What could be more intimate? What could be more intimate than that? What could be more holy? That same air was inside a being millions of years ago. Millions of years ago. that speck of argon that's in there, that speck of argon you breathed out, that's floating around in here somewhere, maybe in that stream of smoke from that incense. That speck of argon was here at the beginning of the formation of this planet. Before anything had formed, when it was just spinning gas, before it became molten, before it became solidified, before it had atmosphere. If Ruach means all this, then surely air is holy, and surely we are too. So the next time you hear a quote from Jeremiah 5, or pass a billboard declaring, "Before I formed you in the womb," think of the vastness of this universe. Think of the womb of the world. Breathe in the story of billions of years. You are far more than a singularity of this unique embodiment. And yet you are this unique embodiment. And your life, this you here, began with first breath into new lungs. That's important. This embodied breath into new lungs. Those little 4.5-pound twins. New breath, new lungs. And yet the breath that they take in is part of the fabric of the universe. Arguments for when life begins are at a very real level irrelevant. From a scientific standpoint, from the beginning of our history as a planet, pinpointing the beginning of life is an iffy proposition. They argue about it all the time. In no small part, our desire is to have a human-centric, mechanistic model, and that's what our science is based on. So we have to have a beginning, it has to have gears that move, it has to have an end point, and that's what that is. You understand that. However, that gets complicated when you start saying all of these when life begins at. When life begins, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's at this moment. Wait, no, it's at this moment. It's at that one moment when that atom split off of that. The scientific facts, however, seem to indicate, and I kind of like this part, seem to indicate that life co-created itself. The scientific facts seem to indicate that life co-created itself. And if we were poetic, we might say life longed for itself, and thus it was. Or if we're religious, we might personify it as creators, or creator. Or perhaps if we're spiritual, we might say, everything is alive, and we are in and surrounded by life. Almost all human discussions, whether scientific or religious, about when life begins, are trapped. They're trapped in ideas of being exclusive to animals. Animals are alive, plants aren't really alive, and rocks certainly aren't alive. They're placed into a hierarchy with humans up at the top. We are the best aliveness. We're the most aliveness of anything. And then they go all the way down. You got, all the four-leggeds, some with wings. The wing ones kind of flesher, they're kind of here. The scaled ones are a little lower. You get further into plants. And then there's a big talk about whether the bacteria and the viruses, are they above plants, are they below plants, are they co-symbiotic with plants? And all of these, every single part, is placed in opposition to death. Life, death. Or from your point of view, since we read this way, life, death. We live in a space of life versus death, not in a space where death is an intrinsic part of life. We speak of the moment right before death quite simply as taking our last breath. To cease breathing is to cease, or at least to cease being embodied. I'm rather fond of this quote from 19th century Scottish poet, pastor, and storyteller George MacDonald. Anybody know him? Big influence on Tolkien. Quote, "Never tell a child you have a soul. Teach him you are a soul. You have a body." For us humans, our embodied life begins with first breath. Most sacred texts confirm this. Most ancient stories confirm this. Most mythologies confirm this. Our eternal life is where all these texts are squabbling. Whether you get born once, get born again, whether you go to this kind of heaven, it looks this way, you go to this kind of heaven, it looks that way. That's where you start getting the stories kind of shifting. But if you go into the ancient texts, which I'm not going to read you a whole litany of them, although I did have them on notes for a moment, life begins embodied life. I think it's incredible. The basics are surprisingly, or perhaps not so surprising, we're all Homo sapiens. Not necessarily so smart, but there you go. If we can see that all is actual metaphor, then it's also surprisingly accurate to the elements that we understand in creation. And I find that fascinating. The order with which Genesis talks about how the world being created is perhaps how the world was created, even though the story might not have these story elements, but the truth of this happened out of a void, or the truth that this happened with this story. You even have the stories where you have a mother and a father. Well, in the ancient geological record, you had this huge, massive planet that came barely into ours before it was really fully a planet, and that collision and that release of one into the other is what part of the reason why we have the geologic event that then became. That could easily be that idea of a man and a woman, that idea of a male and a female. All of these stories, you can find threads that are actually played out depending on what song of the universe your ancient shamans, your ancient wise people were pulling down and listening to. Stories in mankind, we've evolved together. And if you don't know this, great apes can whistle.
Really?
Really? In fact, there's some conversation, maybe whistling predates speech, but they don't know yet. We don't know. I don't know how we're going to find that out. I don't know if we need to find that out. But anyone can whistle. You just take a little practice. So my question at first was this, like, how did the earth evolve air? Like, why air? When did life begin? Or did life always exist? Only how we define life. Are we part of a vast, living beingness? And what we do know is that single-celled organisms, that's what they're called, single-celled organisms, which seem, I mean, that sounds like life to me, right? Sound like life to you? Yeah. They evolved in our ancient anaerobic environment and began creating oxygen. The trouble is that for scientists for hundreds of years or so, if not forever, have no definition of life that does not include breathing air. And because they don't have a definition of life that doesn't include breathing air, they get really flummoxed when they come up with this idea of, so first there was life that then created life, but there was no life before there was air. So, and now on the ocean floor they're finding all of these old organisms, these ancient single-celled organisms that do not require oxygen and live at temperatures that are too hot or too cold for understanding of life, and yet they're life. So in the books and the articles in National Geographic that I've been watching for like 2 weeks now in my home, they'll have these awkward phrasings around when life begins. You know, they'll sit there and you'll have this beautiful high-definition vision of like the planet as it's cracking apart, gases are flowing out, and then they look at us. The Earth was alive. When did life end? But life began at, and they like put those right up against each other, not even hearing the idea that you've just given what you've just said. So starting with these one-celled beings, they're called photosynthetic bacteria, produce over millions of years, mind you, followed by the first basic plants. They began producing our atmosphere, the creation of air filled with oxygen. It paved the way for life as we know it, or life as we have defined it. First you started having these little tower things that was spewing out stuff, and they kind of looked like strange little mushroomy things, and corally kind of things, and sponges. Sponges. Your grandmother was a sponge. Your grandmother's Father's Day. See, thank you, grandfather sponge. To fishes, to four-leggeds, to wingeds, and eventually to us. My favorite explanation is from the Smithsonian's website. After describing the first two Earth atmospheres, it gives us this. Quote, now we have Earth's third atmosphere, the one we all know and love. The atmosphere containing enough oxygen for animals, including ourselves, to evolve. Some plants and some bacteria use carbon dioxide and give off oxygen, and animals use oxygen and give off carbon dioxide. How convenient. The atmosphere upon which life depends was created by life itself. Someone wise once said, All reality is God looking in a mirror. What do you see?
Broccoli.
Broccoli. How about a tree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You ever notice how broccoli is like a tree?
Yeah.
How about lungs?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. As above, so below. All light is a mirror. We use props so that we can get the visible into ourselves, so that is ineffable, we suddenly can grasp and wrap our hands around, our minds around, our hearts around. Embodied life depends on air in most ways we never, ever think of. That broccoli needed air to grow, even though it gives us air to breathe, because of the atmosphere that moves. The dust storms in the Gobi Desert, which I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of the dust storms in the Gobi Desert, and then they cover the towns there, and the people can't breathe. It's this sort of horrible event that they have to prepare themselves for. Those very dust storms are essential for carrying minerals up through the currents into the Pacific Ocean to provide fertilizer for the food that becomes the first food for the fishes that fishes eat, and then us who eat those fishes that eat those fishes again. I mean, sure, we've overfished those areas, but the point I'm trying to make is we are so globally dependent in ways that we pay no attention to. All is a mirror, and I'm grappling with every metaphor I can grab. So you get it, you're going to walk out there, you go, I hear this, so next time you eat broccoli, you're going to think of trees, or your lungs, or the people that grew them, or maybe the fertilizer that's in that soil. Because that's the connection. And each bite will then reconnect you back into this sacred world, into this world of web. Air is a moving blanket. It's the highway of the heavens. What happens in one place travels the whole planet in circles and streams of air currents. I am currently training my little white dog, the one that was here last year. She'll be happy to know. I almost brought her today because she's doing scent work. It's called nose work. But it's really, I'm training her to be scent literate. I mean, they'll see their world through their nose because they read the scent of, and it's only possible by air. It's something that comes natural to them, but co-partnering with them so that we have a means of communication. It's amazing. It is awe-inspiring to watch these dogs work as they track molecules of scent that are carried by invisible currents to their source. All as a handler I can do is hold on at the end of a leash and support the environment. Because and she'll look around to something, and I don't know where it is. The handler, you don't know where the scent is. You know, this is what I need you to find. Here's the scent I want you to find, and then she has to go and find that scent, which we can't see. And that is such a direct metaphor for me, seeking this inner peace, seeking God, seeking communion, any seeking thing that we don't necessarily have a visualization for. We have models everywhere. So this little dog goes down to the ground, and I'm suddenly very aware of the air currents around my ankles that are different from my knees. I can hold up here and I can feel a breeze up here, but it's different here, and that's giving her different information. Just sort of the same way you've got to tune into a radio, she has to align herself into the stream, and then she will follow that stream. And when she gets on scent, she puts her nose right down, and she's like, there, it's right there, Lizzie. Cookie? Because we all want to get paid. We all still have to have reciprocity of effort. My friend Sue trains and partners with beagles to find termites and bugs because you can't see them where they are. She's saving people millions of dollars and also part of an industry. But she also trains and partners with shepherds and herding dogs to find human remains buried deep in the ground, in water. Take the dog out in a boat over water. There are dogs who detect cancer and changes in bloodstreams. The world of scent just astounds me. And all of it is possible, not just by the magic of their noses, but by the magic of air. Even without the miraculous nose of a canine, we know this. I mean, we need our scent to smell tainted food. Some of you all know the smell of like, is this milk good? The emotional response we get from smelling a loved one. Anybody have this experience? Having someone pass by and they use the same soap or perfume as someone you love, and suddenly everything comes right back up again. Oh, Daddy. Oh. Instead of going down into that, raise up into that. Oh, thank you for that reminder of love. Thank you for that scent as a carrier of a reminder of love. Come on. We all have the experience of relaxing to lavender. That's a good thing. All of this is possible because of our immersion in air. Immersion. I love this word, immersion. We don't think of the fact that we're immersed in air. We think, oh, I'm immersed in water. But if we start thinking of it as immersion, of air as water, for a moment it helps us visualize how it surrounds you. Just for a moment. And then think about fish. Because we all know that fish cannot survive without water. Get a more vivid picture, something that's more salient. Climate change is the #1 health crisis on the globe right now. Not just in faraway countries, but here and now. Dr. Mimi Guarneri, among many other health educators and doctors, are trying to show the interconnectedness of all of our global systems. Air pollution is the #1 contributor to cardiovascular disease on the planet. Air pollution, in this country as well as abroad. We don't think of that. Whereas most of us know, oh right, it's something to do with our diet. I shouldn't smoke a cigarette. Well, if you shouldn't smoke a cigarette, why? Air pollution. A cigarette is your personal air pollution delivery device. This is old news. I mean, we know this, right? We know this. We have little warnings on packs of cigarettes. We just don't know how to take that information and make it global. Anybody remember about the Olympics in Atlanta, 96? In order to make more traffic flows, they stopped traffic in lots of different places. And they rearranged all of the where cars could go and where they couldn't go, all around the areas where all this was. And somebody very smart at the area hospitals, and I don't have the doctor's name, decided that he was going to, or she was going to, or they were going to study what that might do. And what they discovered was a 41% drop in acute asthma cases during the 96 Olympics. 41%. That's huge, right? So, what's happening now? Millions, if not billions of dollars have gone into pharmaceutical research and interventions for asthma. But what have we done about the obvious culprits? What have we done about the elephant in the room? I mean, many of you probably remember the efforts made during the Beijing Games. The athletes that were not going to compete over there because their lungs are so expanded, because the pollution was so bad that they banned all traffic in the entire area. Cars were not allowed at all. And the air on one level cleaned. But as one reporter noted, she stood up and she still could not see the sky. It was a black and smoke. The Paris Accords, they're not only about melting Arctic ice. They're not about sea level rise. They're about far more, something more intimate as your next breath. The ashes from one fire can travel the globe or the neighborhood, as all of us who live near pyrogenic forests here know, as people in California are intimately aware of. I ponder the German peoples who lived in the areas around the concentration camps. They talked about the smell. They talked about the ash. They were literally breathing in the bodies of burning Jews. And they did nothing. Ruach means air, but it also means spirit. What does it mean to see air as holy? What ancestor does it carry into your body? Ashes to ashes, dust to dust is not the end of life. It is literally the cycle of life. It is the fertilizer that helps life grow. We feed each other, literally and spiritually. What unholy thing are we breathing in while we turn a blind eye? What holy thing are we breathing in? What holy thing are we breathing out? Gentilus writes, quote, "The issues of poverty, global warming, species extinction will never be solved by our talking, our coursework, our panels and commissions. They are emotional issues, and solutions will never occur to us until we open our emotions and feel the impact, until we are struck by the grace that helps us see the real meaning behind this. What you do for the least of them, you do for me." We have to find the courage to feel the feels, not just when the little child beside you is having an asthma attack, to reach for the new and next and better inhaler, not next for the person who's dying of cardiovascular disease because we can't see far enough to know what we need to do. Dr. Mary states it succinctly, quote, "Our health is intimately connected to the health of the planet. Air carries more than dust and gas, more than particles and scent. It also carries sound. The song of the world is only sung because the waves of notes bouncing in the ocean of air echo back as we sing out. We can only hear because we have air to hear and ears to hear it with. We have drums inside our heads. Some of them need augmentation, like mine. Goes out, bounces back. It's a mutuality. From lullabies to protest songs, from hymns to hollers to hootenannies, we swim in a sea of sound. We are her children, her guardians. We are simply herself, and she is us. We are all echoes. Happy Father's Day." Gentilus writes, "Revelation is in the air that we breathe. It is never changed. It never will. It is always the same. Take care of each other. I am with you. I am in you." Perfect hope is achieved on the brink of despair when, instead of falling over the edge, we find ourselves walking on air. Thomas Merton. I want to leave you with this beautiful Mountains prayer song of spirit, also by Miss Phillips. "I will not leave you comfortless. I will not leave you alone. I am the air you breathe in. I am the light of every star and every dawn. I am the air that you breathe in. I am the light of every star and every dawn." And so,